Peace. I just wanted to take a moment and just add on about the Darren Wilson indictment. One of the things that people have been consistently saying is how vulnerable black males have been in terms of police brutality in this country, and how Black Lives Matter. I think that when you examine the historical record, that it's appropriate to say that as black and brown people, we've always been in a vulnerable position since we've been in this country, whether we arrived here before 1776 or we got here after. In terms of power dynamics, whenever we've been in proximity to the dominant society or the status quo, we've been in a vulnerable position, which means we've always been in a position where we've been capable of being harmed. And oftentimes that was basically the law. You know, whether it was on a federal level or on a state level, our interests as a group have never been reflected in the dominant society or the white supremacist status quo. And, you know, moving towards the era that we now exist in, we have a lot of other groups who are considered minorities who are there right alongside us. You look at women, they're in a vulnerable position. You look at our elders, they're in a vulnerable position. You look at our children, definitely in a vulnerable position where our interests as groups are not reflected in the dominant society, the white supremacist status quo. So from that vantage point of view, I think it's important for us to keep in mind that to appeal to a group that does not see our interests as primary is flawed on our part. You know, to put hope and to invest trust in a system that has never looked out for our interests to begin with is not the most effective approach to take in terms of taking ourselves out of that position of vulnerability. I think that when we look at the historical record, that you see various members of our group, black and brown people, women, who have fought to put ourselves in a better, more comparable and solid position in terms of protecting our interests. When you look at our communities like Black Wall Street or Rosewood, even in those instances where we were able to be self-determined, a lot of those communities were destroyed because we didn't have the military might to protect ourselves. Now that's something that we need to start considering as well, in terms of even in the interests of having community control and investing in ourselves. We also have to invest in the ability to protect our own interests. So I think that is first and foremost. We need to have a level of national consciousness where we realize that this is not anything that's new. You know, so what do we need to do in terms of being able to protect our own interests and take ourselves out of such a vulnerable position? One of the things that we can do, and that we are doing on many different levels around the country, is that we are investing in more community control, which means when you look at these occupying forces or these police forces, they're becoming a lot more militarized, which means, and you can do this in your own community, when you see new faces on the police force, you know, quiz them, find out what their background is. And one of the things that you're going to start seeing is a lot of the people who are on these police forces in these communities have a military background. So you're not dealing with people who grew up in that community. You're not dealing with people who are familiar with the cultural nuances, or who are culturally sensitive and conscious of what the community's needs actually are. You're dealing with people who are outsiders. You're dealing with people who are essentially an occupying force. And when we don't have community control, or we're not policing ourselves or dependent upon one another, then we're putting ourselves in such a vulnerable position where these occupying forces are going to have to do it for us. You know, and that's something that we've seen historically. And in order for us to put ourselves in a better position, we have to be a lot more unified and demonstrate a lot more solidarity in terms of taking responsibility for what we see going on in our own communities and policing ourselves, and being able to let people know, like, no, we got this. You know, yeah, we see this, that, and the third that's going on, but we're going to handle that. You know, And, you know, that is one of the steps that we can take in terms of taking ourselves out of such a vulnerable position. Another thing, supporting black businesses and, you know, being able to make sure that our dollar circulates a lot more times in our own community so that we are able to establish the proper infrastructure to support ourselves, you know, business wise, community wise. You know, that's something that goes along with a national consciousness, or seeing that whatever has happened to any of us anywhere is something that can happen to any of us everywhere. You know, so, you know, the things that's going on in Ferguson, that has set a national precedence, which means we need to start preparing and organizing in whatever city and the community that we are in, realizing that we need to accept our own and be ourselves and to protect our own interests. Third and lastly, the ultimate goal is peace. You know, peace with one another, and peace in terms of being able to live in a state of harmony, not only with each other, but also with our planet. And I'm not sitting here saying, you know, y'all need to peacefully protest and y'all need to do this. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that ultimately that is the goal. You know, so in this wartime, that is the goal that we should be seeking, you know, because ultimately our children are going to be inheriting in this world when we're no longer here. And we should be invested in making sure this is a better place once we do leave here. So with all of that said, you know, I will that this was inspiring, it was empowering, it was educating for those of you who want to just get some perspective from me in terms of what we can be doing. First and foremost, national consciousness. You know, we need to realize that as a group of people, we need to be more unified. We need to show more solidarity, and that anything that happens to any of us anywhere is something that can happen to any of us everywhere. Secondly, we need to demonstrate more community control. You know, stop relying on justice from an unjust system, you know, or people to judge you properly who are in a superior position and who have never historically shown you a sense of social economic equality. Judge yourselves. You know what I'm saying? We need to put ourselves in a position where we're able to police ourselves. So community control is number 2. And number 3, the ultimate goal is peace amongst ourselves, and so that we can leave this planet a better place for our children when we leave here. Peace.